Hello and welcome dear students. Today we will discuss about one of the pollution known as thermal pollution, its meaning and generation, its cause or sources, its impact on the aquatic life and its mitigation measures. Let's first understand the meaning and generation of thermal pollution. Thermal pollution has come to mean the detrimental effects of unnatural temperature changes in a natural body of water caused by the discharge of industrial cooling water. We cannot continue to expand the production of electric power to increase discharge of heated wastewater into the aquatic environment indefinitely without causing a major ecological crisis. Except in hydroelectric plants, the source of energy is locked in fossil fuels like coal, oil or gas or in nuclear fuel. This energy is transformed into heat by burning or by nuclear reactions. The heat that gets generated then changes water into high pressure steam. As the steam turns the rotor in a turbine, the heat is transformed into mechanical energy. The turbine motor is connected with the generator where the mechanical energy is converted into electrical energy. But the amount of electrical energy that emerges from the plant is far less than the energy that went into it in the form of fuel. At present, most of this heat is thrown away as with many other waste products, and it is capable of polluting the environment just as surely as domestic wastewater, industrial waste and agricultural waste. Some of the waste heat goes into smokestack in hot gases. Some is disposed of in nearby stream or lake where it may be of more serious problem. After the steam passes through the turbine, it goes into condenser. There, cooling water circulates through tubing and cools the steam until it condenses into water. It can then be returned to the boiler to begin the cycle all over again, as is depicted in this figure. Meanwhile, the cooling water is returned to the river, lake or coastal waters of the sea from where it came, carrying the waste heat with it. Now, we'll try to understand the causes or sources of thermal pollution. The various causes of thermal pollution are as follows. Number first, electric power plants. The major sources of thermal pollution are electric power plants and industrial factories. In most electric power plants, heat is produced when coal, oil or natural gas is burned or nuclear fuels undergo fission to release huge amounts of energy. This heat converts water to steam, which in turn rotate turbines to produce electricity. After doing its work, the spent steam must be cooled and condensed back into water. To condense the steam, cool water is brought into plant and circulated next to hot steam. In this process, the water used for cooling warms 5 to 15 degrees Celsius, after which it may be dumped back into lake, river or ocean from which it came. Similarly, factories contribute to thermal pollution when they dump water used to cool their machinery. Number second, domestic sewage. Domestic sewage is casually discharged into rivers, lakes or canals or streams without waste treatment. The municipal water sewage normally has higher temperature than receiving water. With the increase in temperature of the receiving water, the dissolved oxygen content decreases and the demand of oxygen thus increases, and hence the anaerobic conditions will set up, resulting in the release of foul and offensive gases. Number 3, tree cutting along shoreline. Streams and small lakes are naturally kept cool by trees and other tall plants that block sunlight. People often remove this shading vegetation in order to harvest the wood in the trees, to make room for crops, or to construct buildings, roads and other structures. Left unshaded, the water warms by as much as 10 degrees Celsius. Number 4th cause of thermal pollution is soil erosion. The removal of vegetation far away from a stream or lake can also contribute to thermal pollution by speeding up the erosion of soil into the water, making it muddy. Muddy water absorbs more energy from the sun than clear water does, thus resulting in further warming of water. Now, the consequences of thermal pollution. A good amount of information is available on how temperature affects the life process of aquatic organisms. Most of the effects stem from impact of temperature on the rate of metabolism, which is speeded up by the heat in accordance with Van 't Hoff principle, which says that rate of chemical reaction increases with rising temperature. In general, the metabolic rate doubles with each increase of 10 degrees Celsius. Now, lifespan. All organisms have temperature limits to their survival ability, but for most acclimation is possible to some extent if the temperature change is gradual. A sudden change in temperature, however, is generally lethal. Hence, a rapid temperature change or sudden transference of fish to warm water may result in death at a temperature well below that regarded as lethal for the species. Temperature also affects the longevity of fish. High temperature may lead to a short but exhaustive spell of rapid growth. For example, Daphnia can live for 108 days at 280 Kelvin, but its lifespan at 300 Kelvin is only 29 days. Now, the impact on respiration. Increase in temperature not only causes disappearance of dissolved oxygen, but due to lower solubility of oxygen at higher temperatures, as is depicted in table, but also increases the rate of respiration of fish. The oxygen consumption for most fish increases fourfold as the temperature of water is raised to the maximum at which they could survive. At higher temperatures, the hemoglobin in the blood of fish has a reduced affinity for oxygen and therefore becomes less efficient in delivering oxygen to the tissue. The combination of increased need for oxygen and reduced efficiency in obtaining it at higher temperatures can put severe stress even in fish that are normally capable of living in a limited supply of oxygen. For example, the hard carp, which at a temperature of 275 Kelvin can survive at an oxygen concentration of 0.5 parts per million, needs a minimum of 1.5 parts per million when the temperature is raised to 310 Kelvin. Now, the impact of thermal pollution on reproduction of organisms. Temperature profoundly affects the reproduction of aquatic animals. An increase in temperature induces the seasonal development of gonads and triggers females to deposit eggs. A rise in temperature also reduces the time taken by the fish's eggs to hatch. For example, fertilized eggs of Atlantic salmon hatch in 114 days in water at 275 Kelvin, but the period is shortened to 90 days at 280 Kelvin. Similarly, trout eggs hatch in 165 days at 275 Kelvin and in 32 days at 285 Kelvin. Excessive temperatures, however, retard the normal development of eggs. Further, there are critical temperatures above which fish will not reproduce. For example, brown trout do not reproduce above 285 Kelvin. Now, we will discuss about the impact of thermal pollution on swimming. In general, fish tend to raise their swimming speeds and show more spontaneous movements as the temperature rises. Stocky salmon cruises twice as fast in water at 290 Kelvin as it do in water at 275 Kelvin. Above 290 Kelvin, however, its speed decreases. The decrease in speed at higher temperatures affects their ability to get food. They slow down in pursuing minnows and at still higher temperature are almost incapable of catching the minnows. Now, food assimilation. The temperature of water has a profound effect on the assimilation of food in fish. It has been established that digestion is fast at higher temperatures. Tracer experiments with young carp have revealed that at 283 Kelvin, the food takes 18 hours to pass through the alimentary canal, while at 300 Kelvin, it takes only 4 to 5 hours. Since at higher temperatures, the metabolic activity of fish increases, a substantial portion of the food intake in warm waters is utilized for merely maintaining the body functions. Now, the influence of thermal pollution on morphology. Temperature difference during growth and development induce morphological changes in aquatic organisms. A variety of fish, when subject to thermal pollution, show agape jaws, eye abnormalities, and twinning. Above 305 Kelvin, the incidence of spinal deformation is very high. Now, we'll discuss about the synergism caused by thermal pollution. The toxicity due to insecticides, detergents, paper mill effluents, and other chemicals show escalation with rise in temperature. For example, the lethal effects of 5 and 10 parts per million zinc sulfate to rainbow trout are roughly doubled on raising the temperature from 286 Kelvin to 295 Kelvin. At 275 Kelvin, carp is able to tolerate a carbon dioxide concentration of 120 parts per million, but at 310 Kelvin, a concentration of 60 parts per million becomes lethal for the fish. Now, we'll discuss the abatement of thermal pollution. Considering the above consequences of thermal pollution, it becomes evident that we cannot continue to dump the waste heat without causing serious environmental problems. Various means are employed for mitigation of heat pollution, which are described as follows. Number first, cooling towers. The use of water from water source for cooling purpose with subsequent return to water body after passing through the condenser is termed as cooling process. To make the cooling process more effective, cooling towers are designed to control the temperature of water. These towers further are of two types. Number first, wet cooling towers, and number second, dry cooling towers. Wet cooling towers. In these type of towers, hot water is sprayed over the baffles in a huge hyperbola-shaped tower. Cool air rising through the tower carries waste heat, and the cooled water is either discharged into the stream or recycled, as is shown in the figure. Two problems, however, are associated with it. Firstly, a substantial amount of water is lost through evaporation. This not only vitiates the benefit of recycling but also concentrates whatever pollutants the effluent may contain. Secondly, in cooler regions, there is extensive fog formation in the vicinity of wet cooling tower, causing damage to vegetation. Number second, dry cooling towers. In this method, the heated effluent is contained in a system of pipes. Air is passed over the pipes by a large fan, facilitating heat exchange by radiation and convection. Water loss and fog formation are controlled by this method, but installation and maintenance costs are much higher as compared to those of wet cooling towers. Now, the cooling ponds. Cooling ponds or reservoirs constitute the simplest method of controlling thermal discharges. Heated effluents on the surface of water in cooling ponds maximize dissipation of heat to the atmosphere and minimize the water area and volume. It is the cheapest and simplest method which cools the water to a considerable low temperature, but the technique alone is less desirable and inefficient in terms of air-water contact. Now, the fourth one, artificial lakes. Artificial lakes are man-made bodies of water which offer possible alternative to ones through cooling. The heating effluents can be discharged into lake at one end and the water for cooling purpose may be withdrawn from the other end. The heat is eventually dissipated through evaporation. Now, dear students, let us summarize all this that we have learned so far. Thermal pollution is the degradation of water quality by any process that alters the temperature of a natural water ecosystem. This state predominantly arises from the waste heat generated by industrial processes such as the generation of electricity. Water, when used as a coolant for electrical power plants, is simply returned back to the water source, thus affecting the dissolved oxygen levels as well as water temperature, and hence posing significant implications for aquatic life. Increased water temperatures raises the metabolic rate of aquatic organisms. This escalation of enzyme activity making organisms to take greater quantities of nutrients and gases, hence altering the balance of a species composition, which can lead to migration as they adapt to changed thermal conditions. A rise in temperature in water body affects an organism's lifespan, respiration, reproduction, heartbeat, swimming, food assimilation, and morphology. Furthermore, there are ecological effects of the rolling water stream flow. Fish and other aquatic life may be sucked into intake pipe, killing them in large numbers. There remains the possibility of trace of radioactivity released in the discharged water from nuclear power plants located near lakes or rivers. Thus, it is worthwhile to explore the possibility of transferring the waste heat to the atmosphere rather than to the surrounding aquatic ecosystems through cooling towers, cooling ponds, artificial lakes, etc. etc. With this, dear students, we come to the conclusion of this topic. Thank you.